in a constant state of fear and misery. No, you're me anymore. Live in a constant state of fear and misery. No, live in a constant state of fear and misery. No, you're me anymore.
Hello, everybody. Bringing you Block Digest number 124 on September 12th at block height 541,120. So what is going on?
Oh man, nothing. Just enjoying this beautiful day. Trying to figure out how come I'm getting a weird echo. Well, it's because I need to mute a window. But how's it going, guys?
Echo. So how about you, Janine? How's your day so far? I say no.
I mean, I don't really remember how my day went because my memory is really bad. The seeds of my day are gone.
Must have broken that memory up into too many pieces.
Oh, well, that'll happen. You know, human memory, it's a real fickle thing.
Yeah, I mean, I tried to do like this memory backup thing. It's like new, hasn't been peer reviewed, but you know, I just want to try new stuff, and I'm pretty sure that I know more about memory backup than anyone else in this space. So, yeah.
Oh man, I had to delete a little bit of my memory after watching a little bit of that cruise going on. Oh my goodness, that was nuts.
Yeah, please, can we like just pretend that never happened? Because it feels to me like it was a giant black hole waste of time of things that I've heard a million times before, and everyone thinks that they're somehow going to like, this is going to be the ultimate takedown of Roger Ver, and it's like, no one, like, he's been taken down the same way so many times. Like,
but this one was on a cruise ship.
Yeah, well, the fact that you know what, he's going to be a juvenile delinquent, juvenile delinquent on, you know, solid ground. He's going to be one at the sea, so not much difference to me.
Yeah, I think Brian Hoffman showed the wisdom of Brian's. He was going to make a parody video, but he decided not to because he thought the parody couldn't be as absurd as the actual event.
Yeah, it was pretty stunning.
All right, though. So I guess just we're gonna dive into it with the Optech breakdown. But
wait, excuse me, Shinobi, I have not given myself an introduction. you have to give me 2 minutes.
Me too.
Oh man. All right. But today I think we're gonna kind of go light on the screen shares. Rick's kind of coming along with the whole new graphical layout we're going to be doing, and so we're kind of just getting ready for that. You know, like always, all the sources and stuff are in the show notes in the video description. So if you want to actually go through the primary sources, they're still going to be there. But we're going to be kind of transitioning into more of a kind of a fancy smancy video layout, and something that you can kind of just walk away from and listen to if you're not really into watching the screen. But so Optech newsletter this week. Again, people being encouraged to run the release candidate for 0.17. We're on release 3 now. And as well, they're going to be doing an Optech workshop in Paris on November 12th and the 13th. And so far, the list of topics being proposed are replace by fee versus child pays for parent as fee replacement techniques. And so those obviously kind of put the increased cost on different parties there. Some discussion about the partially signed Bitcoin transactions standard BIP 174. They're going to be discussing output script descriptors for wallet interoperability. So that's something that's making its way into the new release of Bitcoin Core coming. So you can search for outputs by the output script in the UTXO set. So there's ways to make sure that you're actually managing your funds without going back and scanning the whole blockchain. Lightning wallet integration and potential uses for exchanges. And then the pretty much looking at coin selection and consolidation strategies and policies. So trying to help business kind of find the most optimal way to manage their outputs on the network. And in news, BIP 151, there is kind of a thread on the Bitcoin mailing list. This is being pretty heavily discussed, which I'm very excited to see for end-to-end encrypting the communications between different nodes on the network, so that it's not perfect privacy, but at least this way you're not leaking information by anybody who's passively monitoring your connection between different nodes. The W3C Web Payments Working Group has had Christian Decker of Blockstream kind of coordinating a little bit to make sure that things like Bitcoin and Lightning Network are supported by web payment standards. And he's pretty confident at this point that the current draft specification is going to be compatible with both normal Bitcoin transactions as well as Lightning Network. So this is kind of a nice thing to see. The W3C group is really there to kind of work on standards for different protocols and things on the internet, and to see cryptocurrencies really being considered there in terms of payment standards it's a very good thing, and kind of going forward maybe make things a lot more simplified and standardized as far as businesses integrating cryptocurrency payments as adoption continues growing in the long term. And then in notable commits, we have support in core for Rapid Check. It's pretty much an automated testing suite that allows you to define inputs and outputs for functions and then develop automated tests to make sure that they're actually operating correctly. So hopefully this is going to make it a lot easier to security check and test new functionality brought into Bitcoin Core, and kind of streamline that aspect of things, which hopefully in net leads to a little bit of a quicker development pace. It's really critically important to make sure that you're not introducing security vulnerabilities when altering code in an implementation like that. So hopefully this is a big help with that going forward. Bitcoin Core is in the process of deprecating the sign raw transaction RPC from Bitcoin Core, and this is being replaced by sign raw transaction with key, which would allow you to manually feed in a key that's not part of the wallet, and sign raw transaction with wallet, which would be for keys that are actually being managed by a Bitcoin Core wallet. There's been a lot of documentation put into Bitcoin Core for the output script descriptors to allow scanning the UTXO set. And then LND has had a lot of merges with small tweaks and bug fixes for autopilot, so that channel selection and opening on the network can kind of just be an automated thing in the background that users won't have to think about. And C Lightning has also dumped in a bunch of documentation for its repository. So hopefully this is going to make it a lot easier for developers working with C Lightning to kind of pick through things and figure out how things are worked to build on top of it. And that's Optech for the week.
Heck yeah, man. Always a bunch of developments going on in Lightning. And yeah, I was looking at some of the news story we're going to cover in a little bit with the Lightning app. And it's just like, yeah, sometimes there's like these BIPs being introduced in Bitcoin where it's like optimizing stuff for Lightning. And it's just, it's so much stuff going on with just like privacy Bitcoin related developments, but also Lightning at the same time. And Bitcoin improvements themselves. So it's like so much development going on. It's really nice to have all this breakdown every week.
I mean, it's just a simple way to really keep up with stuff. But I don't know. Any last input on Optech, or shall we slide along?
Yeah, let's slide along, man. Let's get into the meat.
Alrighty. So I've kind of talked about self-regulatory organizations a few times. And honestly, there's something, objectively, I'm a big fan of. Actually kind of have government regulators step back a little bit and let different organizations and companies in an ecosystem kind of figure things out themselves without the government, who never has any clue what the hell is going on or how things work, just breathing down their neck and creating all kinds of onerous nonsense for them to comply with. And that said, there is a new group, the Blockchain Association, being founded by Coinbase, Circle, and the Digital Currency Group. And this specific institution really has the hairs on the back of my neck standing up. One, specifically because of these companies involved. And secondly, I know the Winklevoss twins at Gemini had been talking about trying to start some kind of self-regulatory organization. And so this blockchain association group that these three companies are starting to kind of lobby and deal with establishing things like best practices in Washington, I'm not very comfortable given that it's these specific groups. I mean, Circle has very close ties to Goldman Sachs. They recently bought out OKEx and are trying to shift that more towards a registered, licensed exchange complying with SEC regulations. Coinbase has obviously been a gigantic clusterfuck in its entire time in this space and has repeatedly pushed for every single malicious attempt at forking Bitcoin that has ever been proposed. And Barry Silbert's Digital Currency Group was the architects behind the New York agreement and trying to ram SegWit 2x down everybody's throat and force a hard fork, setting a precedent that major companies in this space can simply dictate consensus rules to the users. And I really don't like that these three companies are effectively starting their own, I guess, SRO or industry group and not collaborating with a lot of the other businesses in this, country. Like we have Gemini, Bitflyer recently expanded into the U.S. There's a number of different smaller exchanges kind of scattered about geographically. And, it just makes me uncomfortable. Like, to me, this does not look like a countrywide industry group that is trying to collaborate amongst themselves and actually arrive at sensible policies or best practices for businesses in this ecosystem. It seems to me like three of some of the most disruptive and malicious businesses in the United States huddling together and attempting to establish an organization that could be used more along the lines of establishing a position of regulatory capture for themselves, of not really collaborating with many of the other businesses in this space that are smaller in scale or less influential, and pretty much trying to create a landscape where regulations they push for, practices they encourage, favor them and entrenching them in a dominant position and start introducing barriers to entry for other businesses in this space. And even potentially, ultimately, in the long run, trying to lay down long-term groundwork for another New York agreement. And this really bothers me because at the end of the day, I mean, it's a reality that everybody can run their own node, enforce their own consensus rules. But as far as the network as a whole goes, consensus is pretty much dictated by liquidity. If you have a large number of people that are in agreement and choose to enforce a set of consensus rules, that is a solid network. It is something people agree on. But without centers of liquidity for people to actually put their money where their mouth is and establish a price that will incentivize miners and other businesses to latch on to that liquidity and establish their own pools of liquidity on that set of consensus rules, it's not really possible to maintain a cohesive and complete viable network. Like the liquidity is the choke point. It is the thing that ultimately glues all of these different pieces together. And I don't like seeing these companies kind of veering off and establishing their own, association or working group. And I'm not very comfortable thinking about where they're going to take this and how they're going to attempt to use their influence through this group, given the past history of all these companies in the space. Because this is just a repetitive pattern at this point. Like the companies who see an interest and a profit motive in putting themselves in a position of control have tried again and again and again to assert that control. And when it blows up in their face, they fall back, they huddle around, and they start preparing for the next attempt to do it. And despite the UASF, despite the failure of the New York Agreement being a huge demonstration of users' ability to assert their sovereignty, I don't necessarily think that means that these companies and these people are going to stop trying to do these things. I think it was a huge blow for them, but I think at the end of the day, they're just going to slink back into the shadows, try to huddle around and figure out another approach, and they're just going to try it again someday. And I think that this group is the start at laying the groundwork for another one of these attempts down the road.
Yeah, at the end of the day, I wonder how long that's going to be and how much damage is caused between now and then. It's like you were mentioning some of the worries about just like these three particular companies in the US. And it's just like, I mean, all the three of these are mixed up into a bunch of altcoins. And yeah, it's like these guys are going to be lobbying politicians here in the US to try and get favorable regulations for them, which has to deal with a bag full of altcoins. And what is that going to do as far as holding up the US? And it's trying to move forward in this industry, because that seems to be the biggest hang up right now as far as like regulations and how it's coming about in the United States is it's leaving us behind. There's other places in the globe that are moving forward a lot, a lot more with the alignment with what Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies are trying to do in general, where this does feel like there's just some regulatory capture and profiteering to take advantage of while, we get to the end of the road here and end of the day. How long is that going to be? How long is it going to hold up people from investing in the right thing and, trying to tell them they should be investing in X or Y because they have a financial incentive to do so. So it worries me too, just seeing these particular three coming together to try and send some money towards politicians. I mean, Coin Center does a good job at educating politicians about what's going on there in Washington, and to see an SRO come together, it feels like, you should have, a wider range from geographical locations if you're trying to do this in the right way.
I mean, it's just about like the longer we go, the bigger all of this gets. It's going to be bigger and more influential players who start figuring out how these things work and trying to assert influence. And ultimately, I think where this is going to lead with this organization and these companies is they're going to start trying to establish backroom deals and relationships with regulators, and effectively down the road try something like the New York Agreement, except with people in government with the power of regulations behind them as the new means of trying to exert pressure and assert their control and influence over the network. And I really think that like an attempt like that is just inevitable.
Oh man, it's I don't know, it's a far cry from what I was, what we were hoping to see as far as a self-regulatory organization popping up. I'm trying to remember. We did see one coming together where it was multiple exchanges from different countries trying to come together, but I'm actually starting to think that was more just Japan and a bunch of Japanese companies coming together. So yeah, like all these SROs popping up to just one location. I don't know. That's not really in line with what I would think a crypto SRO would look like.
Well, I mean, ultimately, the idea is each of these jurisdictions that host a number of businesses would have their own organization, would be dealing with their own regulations and laws. But like the organization in Japan, like there's over 20 members. Like I think if I remember correctly, pretty much every exchange in the country is a member of the group. Like this blockchain association is effectively 3 malicious American giants. And none of these smaller companies that really operate in the US. Like it's not something that's looking like it's trying to be very inclusive in its membership or in its formation or in its lobbying efforts. It's just 3 behemoths with lots of ties to the legacy financial system.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of curious. Like, that's where I'm thinking, like, some of these locations where these SROs are popping up and they're big players in the space, it's like it kind of can limit how fast that area grows. And we might see, yeah, some of those areas where people are trying to run with it in the right direction as far as, like, the Czech Republic. And, I mean, we know Liechtenstein has been doing a bunch of stuff, and Switzerland and most of those Nordic countries seem like they are moving in a direction where they're kind of moving in line with what the space is trying to achieve. So it's just yeah, like we're saying, it kind of worries me about the holdups that we might see in this area because of this organization.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just, this is really something that I think everybody should kind of pay attention to. And this specific group, I don't think is something that should be looked at positively. It shouldn't be looked at as, oh, yay, there's, positive integration going on with Bitcoin. I think ultimately time will show this to be something a lot more insidious and something a lot more manipulative in its intentions and goals. And I think like everybody should keep a close eye on this group and what they're doing and treat them like any of the other malicious players in this space. When they start doing something malicious, they should be called out. They should be publicly shunned. Like that, this is not something to ignore.
Oh yeah, man. Another NYA would not be fun, but it definitely yeah, it's given us a new I don't know, a new pawn on the chessboard to look at.
Mm-hmm. But I guess that's pretty much all I really have to say on this. Not too many details except the purpose of it and who's involved, but I think that's enough to really kind of look at this and put a little bit of the puzzle together. But you want to take us into the next one, Janine?
Yeah. So 2 days ago, Lightning Labs announced a redesign of their desktop app in their latest release, which they say represents a complete rewrite of the code with security, simplicity, and testability in mind. And they say we also redesigned the user interface to make the app more approachable to novice Bitcoin users. So for this new app, it's actually available on both desktop and mobile, and it can run in light client mode using Neutrino. And until they work out all of the kinks, the app will actually connect to a full node cluster run by Lightning Labs by default. But you can also obviously change the options to run your own full node and connect the app to that instead. Feature-wise, they say they're going to keep the number and complexity of features to a very minimalist design. And that, like, a lot of the post is about how they're trying to balance the ease of use for new users who may not have any idea what they're doing and still give plenty of freedom to those who do. One of the things they say at the bottom of the post is they cite some user experience research where they found that a very small percentage of users, in apps across the board actually change default settings. So with that in mind, even if they do offer a bunch of features, they're trying to optimize the default design and feature set as much as possible, because that's probably what the majority of people are going to use. They also make sure, with regards to the security design of the app, that it fits the fact that it is a hot wallet. So they will likely be guiding the user towards only putting funds which are necessary for day-to-day transactions. That's what they say. And they've also, obviously, I think the Lightning Network kind of has limits already, but they've limited channel funds to 0.16 BTC, and that's shared across all Bolt implementations. So they're still doing that just as a safety measure, so people aren't putting a ton of money on there, because obviously, even though the main net is running up live, it's still very early days and they don't want people to be losing a lot of money. Also, it's not really necessary to put a lot of money on there because this is mainly intended as a micropayments platform, so shouldn't be a problem. And they still, in terms of backups, they still use the mnemonic seed standard, which many of you are probably familiar with already, if you've ever used any of the non-custodial apps. The rest of the post is mostly about design choices that they made regarding color scheme and font, and they also want to have the ability to display exchange rates for the funds in the channel in the user's local currency, so that should be cool. And right now, the app is just on testnet, so if you want to help them out with that and get it on mainnet, then you should check out the download links at the bottom of their post.
Yeah, I'm definitely checking out those download links, and I'm really I like that UX where it's like different colors to represent different transactions, and just like that idea as far as UX, like giving some different information just through colors, and like we were saying how there was that article on good wallets, and one of the things that people need to think about is like just the simplicity of like a different color would show like a different action could help a person a lot. And it's like very distinct color changes from purple to orange, from on chain to off chain. And the main thing I'm excited about is like it helps users like myself that are pretty novice when it comes to command line operations and how exactly to get everything synced and working together and running Lightning. And I see James Bond going crazy in the troll box talking about no one's using it and da-da-da. And it's just like, who here is using it? And
I use it, punk. I bought stickers.
Right. I was going to say, like, I know that there's guys that have bought stickers in the Mumble, and like I saw the Mumble on Satoshi's place for a minute where somebody had posted it there. I've seen the Dragon's Den in the Lightning channels. And to say that nobody around here is using it is an insane thing to say. And more people will be using it whenever there's more access to, good UX and novice users like myself who can jump on there and start opening channels and getting things done. And, forget it, man. The first time that like some real retail markets start putting economic activity on this and the real advantages of, no Visa transaction fees and censorship and getting around all that crap. I mean, and let's say the price jumps back up, forget it, dude. Like, people will be using this. And if you want to be one of the first people using it, I mean, like, these are the first people using it. Like, don't expect it to all of a sudden be the Visa network. Like, that's not it. We slowly develop over time and we move without breaking things, even though this Lightning development has moved quick and fast. So, James Bond, stop freaking out, dude. Come on, man. Maybe he just needs Chris back in the show.
Yeah, I think that's probably you just miss Chris's sexy British accent, don't you, James?
Yes.
But yeah, I guess I don't know. Lightning is pretty, like, it's looking pretty solid, and especially this app I think is really trying to hit the bar for like that simple user experience. Like you said, Rick, with like the color changes, like they have like this purple layout for dealing with Lightning stuff, and then going into the more advanced user interface, like directly managing individual channels or whatever, it kind of goes gray and less colorful, so you can kind of see just that like subliminal difference in like what you're interacting with. And then, like, you said again, the orange switch to on-chain payments versus purple, just it's like all the little subtle cues that just kind of give the user the like the feeling like, okay, I'm interacting in a different way now, so I need to think about this differently. I think like just the subtlety of it is very well done in terms of the user interface and experience.
Yeah, man, it's really developments like that that are really going to help, take it off on the retail side once, people really need it and they're using it, and everybody's saying like, hey, we need to get on this network. It's these little modifications that don't seem that, heavy with the technical capabilities, but it's like doing so much for the user side that it's going to be extremely helpful. So I think, yeah, this is going to be a great development. It's one of those things where last night I was trying to download it and I was like, wait a minute, I should probably, wait till after this show. And so I'm going to try and get towards it. And so you'll see more novice users on the Lightning Network like myself there.
Mm-hmm. All right. So I guess ready to give us a little explanation of how stupid academia can be, Janine? This was a really ridiculous one.
Yeah, I don't feel like I really need to spend too much time on it because Laurent kind of already went through most of it in the thread, which I linked to, but I just thought it would be important to bring more attention to it because this is the kind of research, quote, research that ends up informing or not informing a bunch of really bad journalism around Bitcoin in general. And so his thread is about a paper that got accepted and it got published on the 5th of September. So only about a week ago. It got accepted in August, but it was received all the way back in June 2017. So this is a very old paper. And the thing that he points out in the paper, which is titled Blockchain Inefficiency in the Bitcoin Peers Network, he said that they basically just looked at they monitored the Bitcoin network for a single week back in, I think this was April or May. They basically they monitored the network for about a week, just 1 week. And they made this claim right in the abstract of their paper saying 42% of transactions are not included in the blockchain after 1 hour from their appearance, and 20% of transactions are still not included in the blockchain after 30 days. What they were actually looking at, though, was a bunch of spam transactions that someone had been repeatedly broadcasting, and that miners had deliberately decided not to, or was it miners, or I think also full nodes did that as well. Do you remember whether it was also full node, Shinobi?
It was really a very like kind of complicated attack where there was a lot of multi-output spam creating dust, and then miners kind of playing games with what they would or wouldn't mine to drive things up, and then after that a long period of like consolidation spam with like a lot of inputs instead of outputs.
Yeah. So what's so fraudulent about this paper is that, one, it wasn't over the long term, and two, they kind of chose a week where, there was all of these spam transactions that the network was deliberately trying to not pay attention to. And that obviously played into this bogus 42% figure of transactions not included. And so that 1 week of observation was used as as evidence for their theory that the Bitcoin network is not reliable for timestamping purposes. and that the incentives are misaligned. So yeah, I just wanted to briefly just bring attention to that because I think it's important, because I think things like that happens way more often. And this is like when it gets published, like this was published in an actual data science journal. This actually got published. So the fact that this is going into a journal, this is the stuff that journalists will like if they do any research at all. Some of them don't even bother to do that. But the ones that do, they're going to be coming across papers like this. They're not going to, notice the blatant errors in terms of like the research scope, and they're just going to publish stories based on this information. Or if something new comes up in Bitcoin, there's another disruption, they're going to go like, aha, look, this paper that was published back in 2018 or researched back in 2017 found that, a lot of transactions are left out. And that's really, it's not helpful. Like all of this is really damaging. And to be honest, like the data, whoever was involved in this paper, I mean, obviously their names are listed. Can't really pronounce them because I'll probably butcher it. But this is like really, it's a shame for data science. I would not call myself a data scientist if this was the kind of crap that I was publishing.
Yeah, I really hate whenever researchers start to pick and cherry pick their information like that, and then and then some reporter will just drag it back out, and it's like, come on, guys, Bitcoin does not exist in a vacuum. Like we're going over, there's like a newsletter of updates. Like this thing constantly is going through transformation. So yeah.
And yeah, I think you really hit the nail on the head, Janine. Like a weak sample of one arbitrary period, like that's absurd. Like all of the data, if you're running a node, it's there. You can like run this kind of simulation or analysis over the entire history of things. Like in a lot of I'm sure a lot of block explorers even have historical data for when transactions were originally relayed. So you can go through and analyze a number of things, or you could just you have a staggered sample of different periods over a long like interval of time, and then average over all of those samples. But just 1 week in one arbitrary period where there was clearly like intelligently maliciously done spam distorting the fee market and the entire functioning of the network, like it's almost like an intentional hit job. Like we will pick this period specifically so we can come to these conclusions. In other words, like preforming a conclusion and looking for data to fit that preformed conclusion. And that is not how science works. That is not how experimentation is supposed to be used to arrive at actual results or conclusions. Like that's propaganda.
We live in a world of black and white, though, Shinobi. They want to know right now.
Yeah. But
all right, man. Let's leave academia and get back into Bitcoin here. And I guess I'll take us into this next story about Gemini. They're running the gun on these. Everybody's doing this stablecoin. It's all the rave. So Gemini's jumping on the bandwagon. We saw Liechtenstein Union Bank issue its own stablecoin similar to Tether last month, and so Gemini is doing the same. They released a press release a couple days ago on September 10th, and let's just get into this. They say, quote, "To date, there has been no trusted and regulated digital representation of the U.S. dollar that moves in an open, decentralized manner like cryptocurrencies. Enter the Gemini dollar, a stable value coin that is issued by Gemini, a New York trust company, strictly pegged 1-to-1 to the US dollar and built on the Ethereum network according to the ERC20 standard for tokens." Boy, that's an awesome standard. The Gemini dollar combines the creditworthiness and price stability of the US dollar with blockchain technology and the oversight of US regulators, namely the New York State Department of Financial Services. So yeah, starting a couple of days ago, you could convert your Bitcoin to GUSD, which is the ticker for these Gemini dollars, and send it to an ETH wallet of your choice or convert them to USD. It's trying to, like it's saying, just producing a stable coin for their platform. So how they plan to instill this trust in this GUSD will be that all these dollars will be held at a bank in the U.S. and are eligible for FDIC pass-through deposit insurance. So yeah, all their dollars that are going to be audited will be at the State Street Investment Bank in New York. So also this USD deposit balance will be examined monthly by an independent registered public accounting firm to verify the one-to-one peg. And this is according to Gemini's statement, but I did see a report where they were saying like this would be multiple companies, but I did look at the first audit that was done by a company called BPM Accounting and Consulting, a California-based company that was founded in the mid-'80s, and they issued their first audit, and it was saying that, as with the press release, Gemini issued 100,000 of these Gemini bucks. And Tyler Winklevoss had this quote to say from the Bitcoinist story, quote, "It's not just Gemini trust, but you have to build a network of important players that are also trusted to solve for the trust problem of a stablecoin." And the New York Department of Financial Services Superintendent Mario Vuyo complimented Gemini's setup, stating, "These approvals demonstrate that companies can create change and strong standards of compliance within a strong state regulatory framework that safeguards regulated entities and protects consumers." The article then brings in an interesting Twitter discussion that was sparked by Meltem Demirs, which she says, so basically we have more tether. Feel like USD collateralized stablecoins are only marginally interesting at best. There are dozens of efforts underway, and I don't see natural demand for these assets. Hope this makes them money because it sounds like it was expensive to print, which, she's right on that. It does sound like it cost a lot to issue these tokens on a regulated path in New York. I'm sure there was some heavy funding issued for all this. But however, when we are talking about the demand of these stablecoins, it's used to describe the need for liquidity across exchanges, as well as a unit of account of that's recognizable to the customer. So honestly, I'm not entirely sure how I feel about this, but it does feel like this is a natural progression of where we're going, where these exchanges are issuing their own stablecoins and using that for settlement on their platform only. And then maybe something like Tether will just be used for liquidity across exchanges. And I'm not sure exactly how it's going to play out, but I mean, it looks like this is sort of the growing trend. I mean, I keep hearing stablecoin this and stablecoin that at these meetups where people were talking about developing something. And, we saw, like we said at the beginning of this, is Liechtenstein last month issued their own. And so I wouldn't be surprised if we start seeing multiple stablecoins from separate exchanges, maybe in just I'm not sure exactly how it's going to play out, but Gemini is the first in the U.S. to do so, and they did it all the regulated way. So we'll see how it plays out for them. Any comment you guys got on these Gemini buckaroos?
Well, I mean, I have two real issues with this. First and foremost, I think building on Ethereum was completely fucking retarded. Like, Omni has proven itself as a tokenized protocol on Bitcoin used for Tether. I mean, Counterparty is another example. And Counterparty actually has built-in functionality to the protocol itself, I believe, that allows you to kind of seize back coins. So it would allow them to have control over where the tokens are flowing, as well as just controlling the value of the asset through the backing. But it seems very stupid to be building something like this on Ethereum with Blockstream rolling out Liquid and something built on Bitcoin being very quickly interoperable with Liquid to kind of enable that fast arbitrage on the fiat and the crypto side. It just seems like a very, very stupid technical decision in terms of how efficiently it could be used to pull arbitrage trades in the crypto ecosystem, and especially with Bitcoin. And then secondly, like with stable coins in general, I think, like, I'm not sure like where to even try and draw a concrete number, but eventually you're going to hit a point of diminishing returns. We're having more of these stable coins is actually creating inefficiency instead of efficiency. I mean, the main purpose of them right now is effectively for faster transfer of fiat, so to say, by transferring liabilities quickly between exchanges that are held by the issuer for arbitrage trading, or as a safe haven temporarily to kind of be able to park your value in a fiat analog on downturns in the market and things like that. But I think like after a point, like the more there are, you're not actually creating efficiencies in a place to park your value tied to fiat or pull arbitrage trades. You're just making things way too complex because all of these coins effectively at the end of the day boil down to trust in the issuing institution. And if you have a dozen different issuers of all of these stable coins, I mean, it really starts throwing things out of whack. Like, who is the most trusted? Like, how are these prices for each individual stable coin going to trade on the market based on the degree of trust the market has in each individual like issuer? Like, what kind of complexities in the market are you introducing by having something like a dozen stable coins that are all going to have arbitrage dynamics between each other? And, you know, I mean, worst case, like you could wind up with some institutions or exchanges refusing to accept certain stable coins because of like their impression of trust in the issuing, you know, party. And it's just like after a point, the benefits just get completely outweighed by the complexity and the nonsense you have to deal with if you have too many of these things floating out there.
Yeah, I could definitely see it stirring up some headaches there as far as, this stable coin over here, we trust it because it was issued through this, geolocation where rights and it seems to be that people aren't pushing their agenda and how they want this thing to move, like it's moving with the ecosystem. But it's really hard to even see like what that's going to do. So maybe it does like require, just like everything, sort of the particle collision part of Bitcoin, where it's like you do the thing and then you see what happens and you see how it plays out. Because I do know that the on ramps, off ramps has been like a big problem with fiat, and maybe this will help with that. And, as far as there was just some interesting things there said in the chat. It's just as far as like, I know Blake was saying something about how it's like for fractional reserving, but I wish I could get him in here for comment on that. Sorry. But it's just there's some things where I could imagine this thing serving its purpose. And like you're saying, it's hard to really game out, maybe just like things in Bitcoin where you can't really game it out until it's done and you see what happens on the other side of it. So, yeah, I mean, it's like, well, I might not be excited about it, especially the ERC20 token thing. That is ridiculous. But, with the state of Ethereum and things, I mean, I imagine, I don't know, I can just imagine a point in time where the Ethereum chain's got some trouble similar to the CryptoKitty moment where, how's that thing going to be liquid at that moment? But, it's something where we'll see it play out, and how it plays out, I imagine the space will change accordingly.
Mm-hmm. Alrighty. Well, I guess that's my 2 cents on this. You got anything to say, Jeanine? Cricket?
Well, the I mean, it's great that banks want to do this, but if I want to have a fund with Bitcoin, I'll just control it myself as usual. I know Canada is a very nice place and all of you Canadians are very polite, but that doesn't change that. Who knows when your politeness might change?
Well, I guess
polite until you get a DUI, man. As soon as you get a DUI, they're like, nope, we don't want nothing to do with you. But yeah, let's keep moving along here. We got this next story coming out of New York. There was we covered this ICO because it was so ridiculous. But so last year was the big ICO craze, where we were seeing white papers in the form of cheap websites with employees, roadmaps, and countdown tickers without much backing them up. So it got so out of control there that we were wondering when the hammer would come down and where. And it looks like the SEC found their first guy to go after. I'm going to try to pronounce this guy's name, but I'm going to destroy it. Maxim Zalewski, a Brooklyn-based businessman, was charged with conspiracy and 2 counts of securities fraud for his role in allegedly defrauding investors in 2 initial coin offerings. The 2 ICOs were Recoin Group Foundation and Diamond Reserve Club, were both in that category of just vaporware ICOs of last year. And one of the prosecutors, a U.S. District Judge Raymond Deary, stated, quote, per the indictment, no diamonds or real estate or any coins, tokens, or currency of any imaginable sort ever existed. Despite promises made to investors to the contrary, simply labeling an investment opportunity as virtual currency or cryptocurrency does not transform an investment contract, a security, into a currency. Zalewski argued that the ICOs at issue weren't securities, but instead currencies. He also said securities laws were too vague to be applied to the ICOs. However, the judge hearing the case has ruled that the U.S. securities law may cover the initial coin offerings and that the government can proceed with its case against Mr. Zalewski. Peter Henning, a professor at Wayne State University Law School in Detroit, has said, quote, this ruling affirms the SEC's position that it has authority over ICOs and that market manipulation and anti-fraud provisions in the law apply. It's an important first step. And we know that James Clayton has repeatedly said that the vast majority of the offerings should be registered and that the coins trade on secondary markets like other securities the SEC regulates. In a January interview, Clayton pledged to sanction more firms if they, quote, if people don't change their ways. So in this ruling Tuesday, the judge said it will ultimately be up to the jury to decide whether the ICO at issue was a security, but the allegations in the indictment would support such a finding. So the case is moving forward, and Mildred Whalen, a lawyer for Zalewski, says her client has denied wrongdoing. John Marzul, a spokesman for the Brooklyn U.S. Attorney, whose office is prosecuting the case, also declined to comment, and an SEC spokeswoman declined to comment. And so, but this case is moving forward, and it's, we're going to have to watch and see how the outcome is on this, because it could be big for the crypto community. However, at the same time, this is all happening in New York while other countries are setting up favorable regulations for ICOs. So similar to all this stuff where the space is moving forward, it's kind of dependent upon the location and how these things are playing out. Because, I mean, yeah, the New York, this case might come against these ICOs to where people aren't going to be so quick to do it here in the U.S., but like we're saying, there's favorable regulations in other parts of the globe, and how they're going to keep these out of people's hands. I imagine it'll just be like, don't sell to U.S. investors, or however they want to play it out. But it does look like we're starting to see a little bit of a pushback from all that craziness last year, and people just pushing out ideas without anything really backing it up and saying that it's this new great investment for you to jump in on. So I think it's kind of a little bit of a positive there, just have somebody kind of getting held accountable. But, like we're saying, we'll see how it plays out.
I think it's, I don't know. I think it's going to really change the amount of hoops people are going to jump through who continue trying to pull ICOs, because like the fact that you can be fully held compliant with securities laws, specifically with criminal charges, I mean, that's going to make people think twice, because it's like, just the slightly shadiest thing, the misrepresentation and some kind of lawsuit or charge being brought against you, that just completely changes the game at this point. Unless this ruling is overturned and kind of destroyed by a counter precedent. But, hopefully, I'm not a big fan of government smashing the hammer and just dictating what is or isn't allowed, but hopefully this deters a lot of the crazier, like scammy shit and just stupid shit in this space, just as a disincentive to like this is the risk you're taking now. Like if you're hit with criminal charges, like you will be held fully compliant to securities laws.
Yeah, that's where it's like, I mean, if we could just get rid of those where, people are just going to get hurt on it and there's no real anything there as far as some science or experimentation going on, just to get those out of the weeds of all this crap would be nice.
Mm-hmm. Alrighty, though. I'm going to slip along into the next topic. So, Coingate, a payment processor from Lithuania, a while back started integrating Lightning as a beta among 100 merchants or so, and have just recently rolled out full support for, I think it's 4,000 merchants they have using their system right now. And so right now, at the flip of a switch, all of these businesses can start taking payments over Lightning Network. And there's no complexity on their end. There's no nonsense that they have to deal with. They don't have to upgrade anything. It's simply a switch. When you get your payment request, Lightning or Bitcoin. And it's a very painless thing. And like I do want to say that I'm a huge fan of things like BTC Pay Server, and think that any business out there, any person who wants to run that and actually be their own payment processor, do it. Like, absolutely take control of the entire payments infrastructure you depend on at every point that you want to and that you feel you're competent to. But the simple reality is a lot of people won't. A lot of people will opt to use other payment processors. And another thing to really point out here is unless you're dependent on a very seamless fiat rail to cash out through, something like BTC Pay Server lowers the barrier to even processing payments for other people. But that tangent aside, I do think that processors like Coingate as a place to start with Lightning Network at first is going to be a very good thing. Because like I think that people have, when they look at Lightning, this idea of just like a wide mesh where payments bounce around from all sides to all other sides. And I think that's a really erroneous way to kind of look at the flow of payments. Like things are much more directional in that it's the consumers to the businesses or people paying things. Like aside from passing money around between your friends, it is a very directional flow of money. And payment processors like this, just being able to kind of flip the switch and all of a sudden activate the ability to receive Lightning payments for all of their merchants is not only a good thing just for the amount of merchants who are going to be able to accept Lightning, but it's a good thing as we start off before people really start fleshing out liquidity solutions and how a lot of those last mile things are going to work on the network. It's very good for just routing of payments as well. Because I mean, like right now, this is 4,000 businesses that can accept payments over Lightning. Payments to any one of those merchants are effectively going to be flowing to one point on the network. So that this is not an insanely complex spider web of things where liquidity has to allow money to move in all directions. It's directional. It's moved to the payment processor from wherever you are. And in the long term, I fully expect people to start looking at solutions and ways to manage attracting liquidity in a much more scattered direction to individual merchants. But as we start off, I think this is really going to simplify things because it's just many points to one point per payment processor as far as how the liquidity requirements have to exist to facilitate payments. And so Like, I really think like this is how things are going to kind of kick off. Like the topology of this network, the liquidity layouts, they're going to be a constantly evolving thing. And I think at first, at least, this kind of thing is going to be very good, because it's not only just flip the switch and all of these merchants can accept Lightning all of a sudden. It's flip the switch and you're not going to have to deal with anywhere near as many of the complexities in terms of liquidity allocation or routing that you would have to if every single one of those 4,000 merchants was their own Lightning node directly accepting things peer to peer. And this is going to kind of allow like experimentation in terms of how these things will work. I mean, like off the bat, it's going to be the processor receiving things, likely batching and potentially just sending coins off on chain, or for the people who are going to be taking fiat payments, dumping off things in the market and sending people their fiat. But this is also going to allow this payment processor to think about how can we structure liquidity? Like what types of bars or metrics are they going to establish when it's like, hey, this business is receiving a lot of money. Let's just open a channel with them and upfront some liquidity and finish that last mile to put it in their hands directly, and kind of allow these payment processors to really kind of fine tune and establish those best practices for when are you going to, upfront liquidity as a routing node, which is effectively what they would be playing at in this dynamic, to a business, and when is it going to be cost effective for you? Like, when is it going to make sense to do these things? And kind of figure this stuff out in a way that's not impeding businesses actually receiving their payments. And then as merchant processors kind of figure these things out, these are strategies, these are ways of analyzing these issues that can then be taken by just regular nodes on the Lightning Network and used as a way to inform how they're allocating their liquidity. And so, like, I think this is a very healthy first step in kind of facilitating something that's actually going to work for the end users on both sides of a transaction and get what needs done, but at the same time also kind of give that place where you can play around and take things to the next step, and not just permanently leave the network in this kind of state in terms of liquidity allocation and functioning. And like this is very good. And I mean, at the end of the day, like a lot of end users aren't really using it right now, but as that use picks up, there's 4,000 merchants. You just point and click, and you can use it. There is no complicated waiting for these businesses to plug into Lightning Network or get things working on the back end. It's, well, I'm going to flip the switch and pay with Lightning.
Yeah, that's an awesome development. Like you're saying, a great step forward with the development process of just like routing liquidity around there. I mean, we're seeing these developments in UX and just the development of the Lightning Network in general. And it's things like this where it's like there's going to be some mechanics that are, hey, this is the more efficient way to route liquidity, and this way we've run into issues. And so, yeah, it's a great first step in testing all that and making sure that once UX, and it's almost kind of like incredible how it's like all these separate parts of Lightning development are happening at the same time. And it really does feel like, yeah, there will be a moment where a lot of people do just click it all on at once. And, we'll start seeing like real economic value and people like making payments for their daily utilities and coffee or cannabis or whatever it is, with some Lightning Network payments. That'd be awesome. Definitely some good experimentation in there.
All right. I'm making a mental note to stop going right before I try to shift topics to a story.
I was thinking like recently I've been trying to do the whole I don't know thing, like getting rid of that. I found I'm not sure. I think that helps a little bit. So maybe you just need like some sort of synonym to and you'll be right on the money.
Alrighty then. Are we ready for the title story? I think we're ready for the title story.
Let's hear it.
So, if you did not get why this episode is called Tea Time with Star Zoo, it's because in China, it's a very common euphemism when the police come and drag you into jail or ask you to come talk to them to say that you've been invited for tea.
Nice cup of tea.
So, Star Zoo, for those who don't know, is the founder of OKCoin, OKEx, which is one of the biggest exchanges in China / Hong Kong. And prior to, I want to say around 2016, before a lot of the China bans Bitcoin nonsense really picked up and before China really started following through on a lot of their crypto crackdowns, it was one of the biggest exchanges in the world, period. And it's actually still pretty damn big. But there was a tweet put out by CN Ledger saying that Star Zoo had been arrested by the Shanghai police and was being investigated for fraud. And there were a number of pictures from inside the station that got posted out. And they all seem to be at very weird angles as well. This is him pretty much reaching towards the other side of the desk where the police officer is standing and just talking loudly. Just people inexplicably filling out paperwork. And a big crowd of people. And it was just very confusing at first and didn't really make a lot of sense. And then Crypto Venus, she's a native Chinese speaker living in London, I believe, who has pretty frequently lately been kind of playing translator for a lot of things going on in China for Western people. Kind of broke it down a little more and explained you can pretty much be held for 24 hours without evidence by the Chinese police, and if nothing's really found, you'll be released after that. And pretty much let everybody know that he'd actually been released and that the case was being transferred from Beijing to Shanghai. And there were essentially some fraud complaints about a company out of Shanghai as well as OKEx, which I believe is based in Beijing, which is why that case file had been transferred there. And it was still not really a lot of concrete details. And so CoinDesk put out a little breakdown after this and really filled in a lot of the holes here. And so pretty much what happened is about 5 or 6 days ago at this point, there was a large amount of positions liquidated on OKEx, and a lot of users claiming there were system failures that prevented them from closing out positions before they were forced liquidated on a market downturn. And so StarU went to Shanghai. I'm not sure exactly why. And a large number of people followed him to his hotel and started congregating in a crowd outside of the hotel and pretty much screaming and harassing him for their money back. And StarU himself actually called the police to kind of come protect him from this crowd. And the Shanghai police ended up pulling him and the crowd down to the police station. Detained the crowd and were pretty much asking him questions about what's going on here. And so really, this is not anywhere close to what this was initially painted as by the CM Ledger tweet. Like this was portrayed as if he was like raided and arrested because of some concrete case of fraud, and that's not at all what happened. Like he was pretty much followed and harassed by OKEx traders who were angry that their positions were liquidated and they lost a bunch of money, and started blaming this on fraudulent trading activity, fraud on the part of the exchange. And one last thing I want to point out is that StarU does not actually currently represent OKEx because of, I think there's been a little bit of restructuring, and most of the companies are based out of Hong Kong now after the exchange shut down in China. And so yeah, at this point it's effectively, this has become a legitimate investigation into fraud based on what I've seen, but it is because StarU called the police to deal with these crazy traders. And I mean, I know like there is, in a space like this that's pretty much unregulated, it's not completely out of bounds or insane to speculate about insider trading or manipulation on some of these exchanges. But I will remind everybody about an incident that happened back in March, where a trader who was liquidated after a very reckless trade literally showed up to the OKEx office with a bottle of poison and was pretty much threatening to drink poison in the office if the exchange did not reverse the trades and give him his money back, which I think they actually, ended up doing. And, to be a little non-PC, non-culturally sensitive, I guess, I have to just state bluntly that a lot of Asian countries have insanely serious gambling problems, and gambling addiction issues are much more pronounced in a lot of Asian countries than most other places in the world. And just kind of looking at this and looking at the history of trading activity on that exchange, just how reckless a number of traders have been, and just past incidents like this before. I mean, right now, unless a lot more details supporting fraudulent activity on OKEx's part come out, I mean, this just looks to me like a bunch of degenerate high leverage traders that got wrecked and then decided to go stalk the founder of the company and scream and demand their money back, and probably, get somewhat violent, or at least implying of violence in the process. I mean, it's just ridiculous. Like I cannot, given all of the historical context of this, really just look at this and go, OKEx is insider trading or fraudulently destroying their traders. Like, this just looks like people, as a lot of people in this space tend to do, being incredibly fucking reckless on the markets and losing a lot of money, and just expecting to be able to get that money back through outrage and screaming and implications of threats.
Yeah, luckily, when I caught this news, it was first through that tweet where it was the guy in the lobby holding a bottle of water or something. And I was like, oh my God, is that guy holding a grenade? Like, just thinking about like the similar thing with the poison incident, like you were saying back in March. And yeah, I was immediately thinking, oh, it's an angry trader. And then I started looking into it, and they were saying it's fraud. And yeah, like you're saying, it's just kind of hard to imagine they would do something like that. But yeah, let me go ahead and say, like, just for Addy in the chat there, that this is Star Shu. I guess you pronounce that is XU Shu. And yeah, so Star Shu calling the cops gets him in trouble there, where, now there is this real investigation. But yeah, I mean, like, this is kind of the trend with just like, I guess, like right now, where there's things going on in the market, and well, it's not the trend in just our market, but it's like the trend with news in general. Like, we just saw the Kraken news with the layoffs, and it was like, oh, what's a security breach? And it was like, well, not quite. And feels similar here, just people rushing on a headline to, get some clicks and everything. And it works, but like you're saying, there is some heavy gambling problems going on over there. We could talk about that movie, The Deer Hunter. I mean, like, that pretty evident. And, yeah, I've seen some pretty terrible things. It's like somebody lost some money and like chopped off their own hand and shit. It's like, I don't think you'd see that even in Vegas. Like, there's some, people just sort of get off like a little bit too far, and then like they realize real quickly like how bad they hurt themselves, and then they want to do it physically, and maybe it's like showing up at an office and getting yourself arrested through threats. It's just human beings acting like animals trying to figure out this world we all inhabit.
By now, Rick, if there's a foreign name, I'm going to completely butcher it and mispronounce it. Okay, that's just how it works.
It's all right, man.
I'm a stupid American.
I'm with you, man. I try to, say like pretty much every time, I don't know how to pronounce this, because basically we know it's going to be off a little bit. But yeah, it was a crazy story there in Shanghai.
Mm-hmm. And a little less crazy, a little more positive story going on in Canada. Canada has had its first ever Bitcoin trust fund with mutual fund status established in the world. And First Block Capital Inc. This is really at this point tearing ahead of the asinine retarded regulatory landscape in the United States, which we'll get a bit into later. But this is a fully regulated investment vehicle for Bitcoin. You can pretty much manage this through a tax-free savings account, which is a type of bank account in Canada where you can save up to a rated amount of money. I think it's like $5,000 or something a year that you can put into this account without taxes. Withdrawals come with no tax penalties. And any amount that you don't use in this limit can actually roll over into the next year, I think. But you can expose yourself to this trust fund through these types of accounts, as well as registered retirement savings accounts, which is effectively you can put money in there tax free. I don't believe that they have any kind of limit, but I'm not very familiar with these types of accounts at all. But they do come with a tax penalty for withdrawal, I believe. And yeah, I mean, this is completely registered, something that you can use to gain. Okay, yeah, Ori in the chat, it's tax deferred like a 401k pretty much. So yeah, but yeah, this is the type of vehicle that so many people are trying to establish in the United States. Something that can be traded on registered exchanges, something that you can use as an exposure mechanism for retirement funds, for things that you have in structures like 401ks, or it's like this is how to gain exposure to this type of things with the same kind of tax structures or tax protections that many investment vehicles used in saving for retirement have. And I mean, like I would never use something like this. A lot of the cypherpunks in this space would never use something like this, but this is the kind of shit that is going to get baby boomers into this space. This is the kind of shit that is going to allow baby boomers to actually cushion themselves against the systemic economic failures that are looming on the horizon, that are just going to obliterate the investments that all of their pensions are tied in, all of their like savings are tied in. And without these kinds of things existing, most of these people are not going to go and directly buy Bitcoin. They're not going to manage their own keys. And in that situation, they're pretty much fucked. Like they are completely fucked if there is no way to gain exposure to Bitcoin, and all of these problems come home to roost and just wipe their life savings off of the map. And like this is part of the aspect that a lot of Bitcoiners don't like to hear about Bitcoin is you cannot tell somebody else how they are going to use this network. It is an open network. Anything that can physically be built on it with how the network is structured can be built on it. End of story. And these are one of the things that you can build on it. And there is actual value for these types of products and systems for a large chunk of the population that are not going to directly interact with the system the way I am or most of you are. And that's an important thing. Like the Bitcoin, first and foremost, is a vehicle to protect and store your wealth. And people who do not have access to it in a way that they can wrap their heads around, can actually manage, are going to wind up getting completely fucked. And I think it's really irresponsible to dig in and just dogmatically scream that you should not interact with the system except in the way I do. People are different. People have different needs. People have different uses for this. And the way you should look at Bitcoin, in my opinion, is how to facilitate as many of those different needs as possible. And as much as a lot of people don't like something like this is a way to fulfill a need of a very large group of people for something like Bitcoin. And it's something that should happen.
Yeah, man. I mean, like this was something I was pretty excited to see. It was something that I thought we were going to get last year, but it seemed like it kind of just that news died down. But then to come back and see this, it was pretty excited because in these stories about different investment vehicles and everything, I feel like the trust fund is probably something that is a little bit more like it's something that's needed more than an ETF or like one of these derivatives. I mean, like those things definitely serve their purpose, but it feels like a trust fund and a mutual fund or just like something more solid like that. It's we got these guys that are these 401ks that are heavily invested in markets that are bloated, and sometime they're going to come to roost. And I mean, like back in 2008, I think it was like my grandmother had a pretty large portion of her retirement in housing, and it was gobbled up. And I mean, like that's a risk whenever these 401ks don't have access to some sort of investment that is going to counter those. I forget what the exact terminology is for that, where it's decoupled from the regular market. I guess that's what they're trying to say, is like something that can be a hedge for these other markets where, I mean, eventually uncorrelated. That's it. Yeah. Uncorrelated, investment tool to where they're not going to be wrecked if something, does come home to roost, which will eventually happen in the boom and bust cycle of the current economic system.
And I mean, it's like it's really fucking important. Like you can't expect on this planet right now to be able to wrap their head around using Bitcoin like you or me do, managing their keys, directly interacting with the network like that. A generation or two, as people cycle out, new people are born, and they just grow up with it. And it's just how they've been interacting with money since they were born. Like it's just become adults. Most of that plasticity and what they can adapt to and what they can learn was eaten up through their childhood. And there's just too many people on this planet right now who are not going to be able to adapt to this the way most of us have. Like, end of story. And I think it's narrow-minded, it's short-sighted, and it's reckless to not consider those people when looking at Bitcoin and looking at the different ways you can structure something that allows you to interact with it.
Just a quick pushback on the chat there. Ari was saying that ETF would be way better because there wouldn't be a need for accredited investors. Like, I just feel like, even though there's not that need, there's going to be more people investing in mutual funds than an ETF or have access to the platforms to trade an ETF.
So I was apparently completely distracted, and I thought that the part when I made comments about Canadians, I thought that that's when you guys were talking about the mutual fund. I'm now not distracted, and I realized that that was out of order. So I would like to insert that previous comment into this discussion. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
It's all good. I know what you were distracted by.
Yes. Yeah, some side drama.
Yeah, is what it is. It's called stupid. All right. Drum roll along. May or may not address the stupid in final thoughts or something. But yeah, so the okay, shit. Now stupid just kind of tripped me up there. Okay, so a different kind of stupid, not the stupid I was just referring to, going on, is the SEC being retards yet again. So there are two products traded on an exchange, Bitcoin Tracker 1 and Ether Tracker 1, that are traded on the NASDAQ in Stockholm, Sweden, and also traded over the counter off exchanges in the United States. And these are simply products that track the price of Bitcoin and Ethereum. And the SEC recently pretty much shut down trading for these products in the US until I think September 20th is when they're going to be making a final decision on it. But they specifically cite sorry, 1 second, guys. Screen share is being retarded. Or not screen share, my browser. I have to download this and look at it. Rule 15C2-11 under the Securities Exchange Act of 1934. And so, again, absolutely not an expert in SEC regulations, and I did most of my reading on this probably a few hours ago, but what this rule looks like, it effectively looks like it's designed to kind of prevent just any kind of crazy shit being traded over the counter as a way to bypass a lot of other regulations. Except there's some exemptions for it. And pretty much the core of some of the exemptions are that there must be a price quoted on a legitimate exchange in the United States for, I think, 30 days. And there's a limitation on periods where there is no price quote, which would imply, I believe, active trading, that would allow OTC to quote the last previous price in over-the-counter trade. And some of the other exemptions are, for instance, in banning OTC trades of things, are if they're traded on regulated U.S. exchanges or if they're traded on the NASDAQ. You would be allowed to trade some of these things OTC, which is kind of what really has me a little confused about the SEC's logic here. So some other people I was talking to about this seem to kind of think that the reason this product was being banned from U.S. trading for now until a final decision was that it was a foreign product traded in Sweden, but it was trading on the NASDAQ in Sweden. And so I'm kind of a little unclear as to the specifics of this rule, but it doesn't make sense to me that the limitation of trading on the NASDAQ would be specifically on the NASDAQ in the United States, as the requirements for an exception to allow OTC trading of a product is that it must be traded on a regulated U.S. exchange or traded on the NASDAQ. And these are both very clearly delineated different exceptions. And so, kind of sitting here playing armchair interpreter, this really, to me, unless I'm completely misunderstanding the rule and how it's described here, seems just like more arbitrary bullshit, as Hester Pierce more eloquently put it in regards to a lot of the recent ETF denials. That is just far overreaching and distorting interpretation of these rules, specifically to gatekeep and close out any kind of crypto related product or product tracking crypto prices from the mainstream financial market. Because it's very clear here that this had a consistent price history and price quotations on established markets in Sweden. It very clearly was trading on the NASDAQ. And by everything I can see in these rules, it should fit the exemptions that would allow it to be traded OTC in the United States. And yet the SEC has stepped in and frozen trading and has 8 days now until they make a final decision on whether these products will be allowed to trade in the United States or not. And it's like, just in sharp contrast with what just happened in Canada. I mean, this is like, American regulators need to pull their head out of their fucking ass, because they are far overstepping their stated mandates. They seem to just be completely twisting and distorting every rule that they cite as a justification for shutting down or shooting down any of these products. And like, ultimately, what this is going to do is this is going to hurt the US. It's going to hurt people in this country. And all of these types of things are eventually just going to go somewhere else, where regulators don't have their heads so far up their ass they can't see the sky. Because, this is how markets work. If money wants to get into something, if something is attracting liquidity, that liquidity will find a way to get access to that something. And if the United States and the regulators here decide that they don't want to let it happen here, then it'll just be some other place. And I mean, this is not the time to be playing world police with the financial system, given all of the systemic economic failures and instabilities that are really gearing up to just smash down on this country's head and destroy its position as a wealthy established nation in the world. And it's really time for them to pull their fucking head out of their ass and really start recognizing the situation for what it is, and not chasing away and alienating opportunities to attract economic investment and economic growth and stifle opportunity.
I mean, I don't see why one branch of the U.S. government would decide to, restrain themselves when no other branch of the U.S. government does when it comes to interfering with things going on or things originating from other countries. Because, there's the old adage that, you're well, not an adage, but the idea of a country basically having jurisdiction wherever its citizens went was a product of the Roman Empire. And I think we've said before that the US is very, very reminiscent of the Roman Empire. And one thing that the US does well is that it tries to, through its corporations or through its citizens or through anything even remotely connected to it, it tries to stretch its arms out into all parts of the world, and anything it touches, even if it's in technically the jurisdiction of a completely different sovereign nation, they will stick their hands in it anyway. And so far, at least for the military industrial complex and also for the financial sector, it's been very fruitful for them doing that, to use violence to assert their dominance on the world. So not surprising at all to me that the SEC is, following in that same kind of roadmap.
Yeah, I mean, the SEC playing its role as far as I mean, this is their head. This is where their head's at. I mean, like, their head is, we're going to try and slow this growth and take advantage of as much as we can until we get where we want it to be and let it collapse. I mean, the Roman, the comparison to Rome, I mean, is not far off at all. I mean, like, just the way that collapse happened slowly over time through economics and the way that it was managed. I mean, it feels very, I mean, I don't have a time chamber to go back there and be like, this is the way it feels. It feels the same, but I mean, it looks the same. And I mean, yeah, the SEC is really just one of these organizations that's trying to gobble up as much money as it can on the way towards some inevitability that they're not going to be a part of. And it's just, yeah, it's just sad that these guys have this much power and they're able to just, make some broad stroke and do something like this where with the ICO stuff, like, I mean, that went crazy for months. And I mean, like, you could say over a year now before we've even seen a person show up in court and them say like, okay, we're going to actually discuss this, where, this move is just pretty swift. So I don't know, just the SEC playing gatekeeper, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I get the rationale of why they do it, Janine, but like ultimately this is going to just fuck us over. Like this isn't a sustainable thing. This is not a game plan that's going to keep giving beneficial returns. Like it's time for America to pull its head out of its ass and realize the very precarious situation that we're in relation to the rest of the world.
I mean, yeah, it's definitely not a good thing for Americans, but consider that most of the people who are running the SEC are, either in their senior years or going to be in their senior years soon. So the sustainability of this regulation model is not even really relevant to them. Like, I mean, maybe they care about their kids, but, their kids are probably, a lot of these people come from super wealthy backgrounds. So their kids are probably going to be fine. They don't care about everyone else. So in terms of like the sustainability of this model, they're probably going to be out of office by the time, or maybe on their way out of office when the world is really, feeling, or at least Americans are feeling the brunt of the consequences of what they've been doing.
It's that arrogant stupidity, man. Like, I mean, even that, it's like, yeah, it's like they're wealthy, but it's like that. I mean, it's not necessarily well off. It's like, God, there's a lot of that where it's just like misconceptions on what they think is going to be best for the future. And yeah, I mean, like, they're not even going to really be a part of that future. And they're really inhibiting their children and their future generations from participating in an economy that's going to be pretty dominant in the future. So yeah, it's just like, maybe it's that stupid arrogance.
All right. So there's the thing I put in the box and you disappear for 30 seconds. Find something fun to talk about, guys. I'll be right back.
Oh,
all right,
man.
What should we talk about, Rick?
Well, I was going to say the cruise, but maybe we should talk about that hike up in Almost Hill. I don't know. I'm trying to think of what's been going on. I think the cruise would probably be more relevant. Like, was there anything else on that cruise other than the debate that's been published? Because that was the only thing I've seen streamed or published from that cruise. Like, I haven't seen anything else. Have you?
No, and to be honest, I think I watched maybe 30 seconds and I got really bored and I turned it off because I just, like, it's stuff I've heard before. I really don't care. And the fact that these people like put this much effort into doing a live stream on a boat, like, I hope you got your money's worth and enjoyed yourselves, but I would never justify that cost, and I think it was mostly a waste of time. I mean, most of the stuff they said there, they've been saying a million times,
I
just
really
sitting in their home office. So
I think Bitcoin.com and Roger funded that whole cruise just to have another debate. Like, I mean, since the John Carvalho debate, has anybody taken Roger seriously? I mean, like, even
Debate me.
before that, I mean,
Debate me.
yeah, I mean, like, we would hear him try. That would be a shouting match for the ages for sure. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't change. It's always the same stuff. And I mean, why anybody would say they were going to participate in these debates from now on is like crazy to me. But I really do think that, yeah, this was all kind of like, master plan of Roger Ver and company to try and get somebody else to debate. And they're like, how are we going to get somebody to debate? They won't even come on YouTube. I know. We'll hire a cruise ship. We'll take them out. We'll wine them. We'll dine them. And we'll spend 30 minutes yelling their faces off.
He's a master debater.
So I was gonna try and insert
Get
this
it?
into the
Master.
yes, we get the joke. I was gonna try to insert this earlier on when I think you guys were bringing up the stablecoin thing launching. But I saw this interesting article by Bob McElrath about whether having a stablecoin is actually possible. I don't know if you guys saw that, but I just wanted to bring it up anyway in case people wanted to check out reading that theory. If anyone has any thoughts on it right now, it's kind of in the middle of a random segment, but
Yeah,
Yeah,
we can
it's interesting.
we can tweet that out and maybe look at it next episode. But that's honestly been lagging on my to read list since I saw it.
I'm sure we're going to have to bring up this stuff because, like I was saying, this is like a growing trend. I'm sure we're going to see more of these stable coins. So this would be some good research to put into the next discussion for sure.
All right, now that I don't know, time get back on schedule. I guess that's a
yes,
plan.
yes.
Yeah. What was next?
So, a pretty interesting development in South Korea, actually. A Hanwha insurance firm is apparently going to be rolling out a insurance policy specifically to cover cryptocurrency exchange hacks. And I think this is a pretty interesting development, both in terms of just, I guess, how rapidly, especially in South Korea and Japan, this entire ecosystem seems to be developing just in terms of maturity, how they're actually integrating and trying to establish themselves as kind of part of the conventional financial system. And I mean, after the big wave of exchange hacks out there, a lot of exchanges did actually get insurance policies, but it was mostly to deal with damages, related to personal data theft and things like that. And no insurance company would really establish a policy that would cover losses from the actual hacking of coins. And I mean, just as kind of like a recap, there was the coin check hack in Japan that really kicked off a lot of the FSA restructuring of things in terms of regulation over there. BitGrail was hacked in Italy for Nano. BitThumb had a major hack in South Korea, and CoinRail as well. And it's apparently the Korean Blockchain Association, which is most of the exchanges in the country, South Korea, including Quanine, Upbit, Corebit, and BitThumb, the four biggest, have actively been in talks with Hanwha General Insurance Company and Hyundai Marine and Fire Insurance Company to kind of look at the establishment of, insurance policies that actually would cover the loss of cryptocurrencies in the events of hacks or system failures and so on. And Hanwha has announced that they're actually going to be providing such a policy next month. And I just think, this is like, it's really just kind of a lot to look at here. I mean, like, ultimately, one aspect of this is you will never be able to insure cryptocurrency in such a way that you can guarantee the actual denomination in terms of the cryptocurrency itself that's stolen. be covered or returned. Because, you know, especially in Bitcoin's case, or anything with a finite or, you know, tail end inflation, like it's completely impractical to be able to ensure events like this in such a way that you actually get all of the cryptocurrency, or at least the amount of cryptocurrency back, without full collateralization of the amount that is, you know, being insured. And I mean, that's just not practical. But, you know, it would be possible in fiat terms to be able to ensure current market values at the time of the hack. And I mean, it's not something that's really going to have like a perfect analog to conventional insurance policies, where you are actually getting the denomination of whatever is damaged or stolen back in that denomination. But yet, at least being able to get its current market value in fiat is something, in terms of being able to cover liabilities to customers, their own operational losses. And it's also just like a huge step forward in this space, period, globally. Like I was not expecting, you know, something like this from insurance companies for a while to come. Like this is a huge step forward to see that they've actually been thinking about this, and looking at how to structure and price a policy to deal with something like cryptocurrencies. And the fact that it's in a month from now, this is actually going to be rolled out and deployed. Like, this is really kind of a shock to me, as far as like how quickly some conventional financial systems and institutions have been looking at how to kind of port conventional financial products into this ecosystem, so to say. And I mean, it's like, it really kind of has me scratching my head and wondering how fast things like this are going to happen in other parts of the world at this point.
Yeah, it kind of makes me wonder if it's got something to do with custodial and cold storage too, where it's like, just gives a little bit more assurance to customers, to where, I mean, I'm just thinking that's a whole over there, Japan, South Korea, there's that North Korean and stuff going on there, and like just the whole North Korea, South Korea. I mean, that reunification stuff's going on. I mean, it seems like there's just a lot at play there, and they want to make sure that their customers are insured on all this. But I mean, like at the same time, I just think insurance leaves the door open for other possible exit scams. So I mean, like it is one of those where it's like it might be a rush too quick for a good reason, but like it's something that I could imagine, like some of these guys looking over some of these ETF proposals and everything would probably be a little bit more satisfied if their customers had some sort of insurance away from any sort of possible losses. But that's just a heavy speculation. I really don't know what to make of this news. I mean, like I said, kind of insurance has like every time I think of insurance, I think of AIG and the 2008 bailout and the way all that stuff played out. And so, I mean, I know insurance is necessary and helpful, but I also think of it as a possible way to scam someone else too.
I mean, it's like, it is a really important part of modern society and risk mitigation, but it's just like, it's a little different when talking about something like an insurance policy paid in and paid out in cryptocurrency for something like damages to your house, versus like paying in fiat to get paid out for the loss of cryptocurrency itself. It's just like, economically, that is a really weird situation in terms of, the valuation, the pricing, the risk of actually having to pay out as an insurance company. And I'm just kind of shocked to see an insurance company that's actually thinks that this is something they can do, that they can price it, like price the risk accordingly, and actually be able to manage something like this.
Yeah, honestly, like the first thing I really think about is just like the insurance company CEO, an adjuster, and like a competent hacker and an exchange operator. And you got 4 people, and you can, have a hack, play a claim, get paid on both ends, and file for bankruptcy or some shit.
But I guess, getting close to the 2-hour mark, so we've just got one story left, and then
Right.
hopefully what I want to rant about in final thoughts won't take too long. But I hope everybody remembers the Marshall Islands that we covered maybe a couple months back. It's a small Pacific island nation that has a lot of natural disasters, and there's constant infrastructure problems due to typhoons and other things. And just being a very fragmented island nation, it's very kind of screwy in terms of financial infrastructure. Like there's a single bank at this point that actually has contact with the outside world. You literally have like weird credit and debit systems that are kind of set up informally with shops and employers and so on. And in order to do something like wire money internationally, you literally have to spend hours and hours moving from whatever island you're in to the central island, which is the only place where there's a Western Union or a bank that can perform wire transfers. And I mean, it's a really fucked up country in terms of the development of the financial infrastructure. And they recently passed a bill and have been looking at creating their own national cryptocurrency to kind of alleviate some of these problems, and have been consulting with the International Monetary Fund as far as how to do that. And pretty much the IMF has advised them not to. And a lot of the reasoning behind it reads more to me like pretty much blackmail and threatening them, talking about the potential of the country being completely cut off from the United States and the dollar, having the only bank operating on the islands withdraw due to anti-money laundering risks if they institute an actual cryptocurrency, which is really fucking ignorant. Because if you really look at the technology agnostically, I mean, I would abhor it and think it's disgusting, but you can very easily build in, anti-money laundering layers or aspects of the system into a cryptocurrency itself. Like these are issues that can be, if people so wanted, addressed in technology. And instead of really looking at this, their opinion and advice effectively reads like, if you do this, if you try to establish a system that would in some way actually remove friction from the local economy and allow your citizens to have access to financial services without all of these insane hoops they have to jump through, travel times, costs, and inefficiencies, then you will effectively be locked out of the global financial system, which would also kind of lock them out from lines of aid or loans that they need to deal with infrastructure problems. Is, like I said, they're regularly dealing with natural disasters, typhoons, and things that are very damaging to the infrastructure on these islands. And to kind of go back to a little bit of what Janine was saying in regards to the Swedish exchange product that the SEC delisted. I mean, this is one of the most extreme examples of that kind of arrogant, just American-centric like attitudes that America projects all over the world. Like they're effectively threatening to completely cut this country off from the global financial system if they follow through with one of the only viable options from their perspective to really address these issues of their citizens just not having access to financial services. And it's fucking disgusting.
Yeah, and I mean, I have I've never been of the perspective that any cryptocurrency, especially a blockchain based one, can work at a national level because you can't constrain it with borders that way. It doesn't work. But on the other hand, this kind of situation with these threats being made is ironically exactly the kind of thing which makes Bitcoin make sense. Like, the whole point of Bitcoin is that you can't just be cut off from a major world power, from the financial system. Like, the financial system and a country, the politics of a country should not be intrinsically linked, that if you go up against one, you have to lose the other. So, maybe the national currency thing, I don't know if that'll happen after this, but certainly it would be a good idea to, like, there's a lot of countries around the world who right now are considering building alternative financial systems that the US can't just shut down because they want to bully everyone. So, this is kind of, when someone flexes their muscles, then you figure out where they can't reach you, and so that's probably going to happen in this circumstance, like it is in other countries.
And I think like this kind of drives home, some of the input I had when we last covered like this country on the show. Like, use Bitcoin. Like, don't make something yourself that is going to make you just use Bitcoin. Like, start accepting Bitcoin. Start pricing your goods and your products in Bitcoin, and start looking at building out those informal, decentralized, gateways to Bitcoin. Like, they can't shut Bitcoin down. Like, if this type of coercive bullshit is eventually used to try to squeeze these islands out of the global economy, Bitcoin is the link into it that cannot be shut down, that they cannot be squeezed out of. Like, don't try to just get that minimal like gain of end user access building your own system. Go all the way. Like, really, like, what do you really have to lose at this point? Like, looking at the situation in these islands and how much pressure they're getting, like, just the number. Like, the last time we covered them was because one of the only two banks servicing the country left, and now they literally only have one. Like, wise up and use the option that will actually work and keep working, and stop trying to apply band-aids to the problem of the United States constant fucking bullshit walking around like we run the damn world. Like, stop putting up with it.
Fight. Samurai wallet. Blockstream satellite. Fight. Pro tennis. Fight.
Yeah. I guess that's my 2 cents on this. So let's roll into final thoughts.
Right.
Come on, somebody, get it out.
Oh, well, you want to start with mine? Janine's got hers up there, and then I got mine. I don't know which one we're going to talk more about.
All right, Janine, go.
Well, mine's pretty short. It's just a follow-up to the thought that I had last episode, which was about Aryan still being missing since, I think, August 20th. This is actually a notice from the Norwegian police, I believe, and they posted in English, so you don't have to translate anything. But basically, what happened in the last day is that a fisherman in a area, they list the towns there. I can't. Fauska and Ragnan, I think you pronounce it. There was a fisherman near there. It's kind of in the fjord, like the harbor. I don't know exactly how to describe the geography, but basically this fisherman found some items that they believe belonged to Aryan, and the weird thing is that they were found floating in the water near an area that's somewhere between 50, depending on where it was, they didn't specify, but it's somewhere between 50 and 80 kilometers away from where he was last seen. This whole time they've been looking for him in Bodo. I, again, don't know how to pronounce it because not Norwegian, but basically that's 50 to 80 kilometers away from the spot. So it's very weird. And this is the first kind of real indication besides his cell phone briefly turning on. I think towards the end of August, it briefly turned on for several minutes and then shut off. But these items turning up are basically the only sign that we've seen of him. And so it's not looking good, because it's not a good sign when someone who's missing has their stuff randomly float to the surface far away from where they were known to be.
Yeah, it's not good to hear. I mean, maybe it can give a little bit of information, because sometimes when people just go missing and then nothing's ever found can be like even worse. But I mean, like, it's still hold up a little hope, but yeah, it's not a good sign. Those fjords, there's some cold water up there. I don't know. It's terrible.
Just a reminder real quick for everybody out there, like, Arjun was an associate of Julian Assange. So if there is some kind of foul play involved here, I mean, put 2 and 2 together.
Yeah, I mean, because that's something that Ancilla has kind of complained about. Ancilla is one of his friends. She's part of the pirate party from the Netherlands. And it's true that, like, he was friends with Assange, and that was one of the organizations that he worked with. But his general job was to help with information security with a number of organizations, especially journalists. So the fact that he interacted with WikiLeaks is more because that was his specialty area. But one of the news organizations reporting on this is Reuters, and I believe he's helped with Reuters as well. So like, I don't want to downplay that possibility that he was targeted for that reason, but on the other hand, like, I also don't want to, give anyone else more incentive to target him for that reason, because he generally just helped journalists. And so if he was targeted at all, it could have been for any reason. He was helping very vulnerable, high risk political people, not just WikiLeaks. So, if that had anything to do with his disappearance, that's really sad, and people should be vigilant.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's I don't know. Yeah, it's just not. You don't want to hear bad things about people that are really helping out like that. Just because, yeah, I mean, it just jumps to speculation where it's just bad news. But let's cut over to this final thought. I was watching some videos the other day on YouTube, just sort of catching up on Bitcoin and everything, and I saw this put out from Bitcoin.com, and I saw Truth Monster in the chat saying that we needed to take a look at this, which I was actually going to bring this video up before you mentioned it, because I really just want us to watch this like last minute of the video, because I think it really just goes to show like who Roger is, and like why we shouldn't even think about, anybody should think about debating this guy. Like, I don't know if you're set up to play that for that last minute, but that'd be good for everybody.
Yeah, just let me switch audio input and we're go.
All right.
Yeah, a great conversation.
Yeah, so yeah, I don't know. I hope we can like talk a little more off camera.
Okay, maybe if there's time this evening. So.
Also, I think I should say, like, I do think this was a little sudden for me, and I would like to see the footage first before I sign off on whether or not I'm comfortable with having it being uploaded. But I will seriously consider it.
I told you from the very get-go that we were recording, so I don't think I hid that.
I know that, but I do think that was something I didn't really answer, and
I appreciate the
I am
request, but
rethinking about now.
we're going to post the full thing so everybody can see it. And if you don't want, if you want to end it
I
right
think
there,
it's very rude for you to do that. If you think that it's okay to post something like this while I am requesting that you show it to me first.
well, you just witnessed it firsthand. You saw what happened. So anyhow, sorry if you think I'm being rude about that, but we're going to post it. So and if you don't want to shake my hand, that's fine. Thank you for your time, Ruben.
Rude. Okay. Well, see you, Roger.
Okay. There you have it. So won't answer even a simple question. Hello.
Stop it there. Man, I just don't even want to hear that annoying guy's voice anymore. And I'm sick of hearing people say, because I'm.
So it's totally cool if I just ambush Roger and kind of show that he literally doesn't understand many key points in the white paper, which is something I could objectively do. And he would look like a complete idiot when he realizes a few things that he misread. So I can just do that and post it online, and he's totally okay with that just because I walked up with a camera in public. Okay, well, everybody out there, go tell Roger I want to talk about the white paper.
Yeah, I would love to see that, man. I mean, like, this is just like, I don't know, just watching this video, you know, I know Truth Monster wants people to watch the whole thing because for some reason, like, I guess these guys, they think we're going to see another debate from Roger, and somehow it's going to change our opinion on the technicals of Bitcoin and why exactly we're here. I'm just remember a lot of last year where Roger was really turning on it, the Bitcoin community, where a lot of people were slow to move over because he's, quote, a nice guy. And I was kind of in that same camp. And I think that this really just sort of like pinpoints that this guy is not nice. He's an asshole, and he's a manipulator and a dipshit. So Roger Ver, like, yeah, you're a dipshit.
Mm-hmm. All right. So I guess that wrapped. No, wait. My final rant. Okay. I'm going to try to make it quick. So the copyright directive in the European Union with Articles 11 and 13, which would require a license and a fee be paid just to hyperlink to another website, and which would require by law content distribution platforms like YouTube to have pre-filters on uploads. So it would require them to actively filter everything uploaded to them and ensure that there's no copyright violations and hold them liable if there were, was just finalized, I believe, today. And the final vote on whether it will actually be enacted is going to be in January. So this would effectively completely destroy fair use of any informational content and cripple the entire internet worldwide. Because if these companies choose to stay in the European Union, they're going to have to enact these systems, and it'll probably be applied worldwide. So, yeah, I just wanted to bring that up. And anybody living in Europe right now, you need to get on top of this. This is one of those things where I don't care if you're an anarchist or not. You need to find out who your representative is in your government and start tearing them a new asshole and not letting up. Because a number of the politicians who voted on this were actually just dismissing any type of criticism on this bill whatsoever as coming from Nazi white supremacists and just completely refusing to look at this. Like, this is not something that you can just roll over and ignore and it'll magically fix itself. Like, this is something people need to get up and do something about. Because it's not just going to affect the EU. This, if implemented, would affect the entire world. And it would make things particularly fucked and totalitarian in the European Union. Like, this is literally something that will completely change the landscape of the internet all across the world if this passes. And it is being pushed through by a bunch of completely technically illiterate, out-of-touch bureaucrats in Brussels, effectively trying to dictate to the entire continent of Europe how the internet should work. Because they're not happy with the criticism that they're receiving. They're not happy with the free flow of information that exists right now and the ability of people to actually educate themselves about what is actually going on in the world. And they're literally taking that final stomp on the neck of the internet right now. Like this is something people need to actually do something about, and not just sweep under the rug, because it's not going away. And if this actually happens, this is going to have consequences for the entire world.
Yeah, I just want to point out, because this is breaking news today. I haven't had a chance to look through all of it, but I don't, as far as I know, I don't think anything is actually being enforced yet. There's just the voting period for what's going to be included in the copyright.
Yeah, the bill's
Motions,
finalized,
yeah.
and the vote to actually implement it's going to be in January.
Yeah. So, one person who's been following that really closely is Julia Reda. She's also from the Pirate Party, and she does a lot of stuff regarding copyright law in Europe. So if you want to keep on that story, you can follow her. Her handle is Zemficon, Senficon.
But like this, like, I mean, we're talking to you on the internet right now. Like this network of different communities that is in this ecosystem exists and can communicate because of the internet. Like this is serious. Like this like everybody is got their head down and just looking at the Bitcoin ecosystem and looking at how awesome things are going in terms of technological development for Bitcoin. But while we're all sitting here concentrating on this little corner of the internet, the rest of the internet is going to shit. And this is something people in this ecosystem need to stop ignoring, because it will have serious consequences.
Yeah, I mean, and not to make a joke about what could potentially be a very serious situation, but don't worry, Shinobi. Like, if this passes, we can avoid uploading Block Digest to the internet, because we can just email it to each other. That'll work.
Yeah.
Email,
Spread the word.
censorship resistant.
The EU can suck my memes. But yeah, on that note, I guess that wraps her up for the day. And we will see you guys on Sunday. Toodaloo.
Hold
Later,
your
everyone.
memes close.